You're very welcome to our Nutrition for Teenagers webinar. This webinar is suitable for parents or caregivers of teenagers and young people. This webinar will give you a good overview of healthy eating for teenagers, as well as help you understand the unique nutritional requirements for growth and development of our young people. My name is Collette. I work as a registered dietitian in Southern Health and Social Care Trust. I'm also a member of the Northern Ireland Public Health Dietitians Group. This webinar contains general advice and is based on the most up-to-date guidelines at the time of recording, which is May 2022. If you have been given specialised dietary advice before or have any nutritional concerns, then please speak with your GP or medical professional. So we know that our teenagers' bodies are going through many physical changes, and these changes need to be supported by a healthy, balanced diet. So today we're going to have a look at why nutrition is important. What are our teenagers eating? Healthy eating for teens and key nutrients, as well as key nutrition messages. Hydration for teenagers and physical activity. Weight and body image, things that you can do as a parent, a role model, or a caregiver. And finally, finish with trusted nutrition information. So in terms of what we know about our teenagers' eating habits, and this is based on research from the National Diet Nutrition Survey, the rolling programme for Northern Ireland, we can clearly see that our teenagers are drinking too many sugary fizzy drinks and squashes. They have a high intake of chocolate and sweet confectionery. They have a high intake of chips and fried food. Also meat products, which would include burgers, sausages, meat or chicken pies. And then we also clearly see that our teenagers are not eating enough fruit and veg. So our teens have currently a very low intake of fruit and vegetables. And also the consumption of oily fish is very low. So what this actually means is, based on our teenagers' current eating habits, we are seeing that our teenagers are not getting enough nutrients to meet the demands for their growth and development. So we have an imbalance of nutrients. So our teens are not getting enough vitamin A or B vitamins, vitamin D, folate or folic acid, not enough of our important minerals such as iron and calcium, and they're not getting enough fiber. In addition, we also see that our teenagers are having too much saturated fat and trans fat, and they're having too much sugar or free sugars. So really this is giving us a very clear picture that there's a lot of room for improvement in the eating habits of our young people or teenagers. And their current eating habits is creating an imbalance of nutrients, which means they're not getting enough to support their growth and their development. So we know that adolescents grow and develop rapidly, and they do require an increased amount of these nutrients to support this. So it is important that they are having a healthy, balanced diet for growth and for development, but also for maintaining a healthy weight and for preventing chronic diseases as they get older. So our Eat Well guide shows the proportions of the different food groups that should be consumed as part of a healthy, balanced diet. If we look at each of our food groups, starting off with our yellow food group, and this is our carbohydrate food group. So foods in this food group include things like our bread, potatoes, rice, pasta, and breakfast cereal. And really our teenagers need to be including foods from this food group at each of their meals in order to be able to meet their energy requirements. If your teen's very active, their energy requirements will be even higher. Fiber is particularly important for teenagers because they're not getting enough. And fiber is really important in terms of keeping the gut healthy, preventing constipation, and also reducing the risk of bowel-related disorders such as cancer. So a key message here is to aim for whole grain options as often as possible. Our green food group is our fruit and veg. So you're probably very aware of that key message of encouraging people and their teenagers to eat at least 5 portions of a variety of fruit and veg every day. This doesn't have to be just fresh, so this can also include frozen, tinned in its own juice, dried or juiced. If fruit juice is being taken, then it should be limited to no more than 150 ml max once per day. Our blue food group, so this contains our dairy and alternatives. So for example, our milk or yogurt or cheese. And our young people should be aiming for 3 servings of calcium-rich food a day. Our protein food group, so that contains our meat or fish, eggs, nuts, pulses, or peas, beans, lentils, and also foods that are made from pulses. So for example, our tofu or hummus and our soya mince. And these are excellent sources of protein and iron. And teenagers need a variety of these foods for growth, repair, and for maintenance of body cells and tissues. Iron is particularly important to prevent anemia, especially for girls who are losing blood through menstruation. Our fifth food group is the smallest on our Eat Well guide, so that's our purple food group. And this is our unsaturated oils and spreads. So our message here is to choose a plant-based oils and spreads. So for example, olive oil or rapeseed oil spreads and oils, and to use these unsaturated oils and to use them in small amounts. There's a group of foods that sits outside our Eat Well guide. And these foods are high in fat, sugar, and or salt. So for example, they would include things like our crisps, biscuits, cake, confectionery, chocolate, ice cream, things like ketchup, mayonnaise, and also our fizzy drinks. And whilst foods in this group add variety and taste, we need to be very careful with the amount of these foods that we're having and also the frequency. So our key message here is to eat less often and in small amounts. Finally, it's important to emphasize that there are no such things as good or bad foods. All foods have got something to offer. And it's really about encouraging our teenagers to focus on choosing a wide variety of foods. So the more variety, the more likely they are to be getting a balance of the key nutrients that they need to keep their body healthy and to support the changes in their growth and development. So we're going to look at 3 particularly important nutrients, starting off with calcium. So calcium is required for healthy bones and teeth. And the stage in life when bones are at their strongest is what we call peak bone mass. And this is actually achieved during adolescence. So calcium is essential to reach this target. Achieving peak bone mass will help reduce the risk of developing osteoporosis in later life. And the recommendation for calcium for adolescents is actually higher than that of adults. So for girls, it's 800 milligrams, and that is the equivalent of 200 mils of milk or an alternative, so a glass of milk and alternative, 30 grams of cheese, 1 pot of yogurt, and for example, a 30-gram calcium fortified cereal. For boys, it's actually slightly higher, it's 1,000 milligrams, and that's all of those things I've mentioned, plus, for example, 2 slices of white bread. In the UK, our white and our brown flour is actually fortified with calcium. Important really to emphasize that if plant-based alternatives are being used, then they should be unsweetened and they need to be fortified with calcium. So vitamin D is really important. Vitamin D works hand in hand with calcium, and it helps the absorption of calcium from foods. Foods rich in vitamin D would include things like oily fish, eggs, fortified breakfast cereals or spreads, but really we can't get enough vitamin D from food alone. But the best source of vitamin D is sunlight, but we don't get enough of that in this part of the world. And that's why the recommendation for teenagers and indeed adults is to take a 10 microgram vitamin D supplement during the autumn and the winter. Iron requirements are increased during adolescence, and that's really to help with growth and muscle development and also for a healthy immune system. We know that people with mild iron deficiency anemia can often feel tired, lacking in energy, and also tend to be more susceptible to infections. Adolescents who consume maybe a poorly planned vegetarian diet or indeed restrict their food intake may be a particularly at risk of low iron intakes. So iron requirements for adolescents are higher than for any other age group. And again, our research shows us that our teenagers are not reaching iron requirements, with intakes being particularly low in teenage girls, and this is of concern. So in terms of thinking about where are the best food sources of iron, well, our animal-based sources, which would include things like our lean red meat, so that's our beef, our lamb and pork, they're particularly rich sources of iron, and they're in a form that is most easily absorbed by the body. We also find iron to a lesser extent in our fish and poultry. Our plant-based sources of iron, so they include our pulses and our legumes, so our peas, our beans, or lentils, also our dark green leafy vegetables, for example, our cabbage, spinach, broccoli, and we also find iron in our tofu and in our nuts and seeds. So vitamin C is really important in terms of the body, helping the body absorb the non-heme iron. So for example, including a glass of fruit juice or eating a vitamin C rich fruit and veg at a mealtime can help the absorption of iron from the non-meat sources. On the other hand, things like tea and coffee can actually inhibit iron absorption, so it's important that they are not consumed with meals. So we know that lots of our teenagers skip breakfast, and that may be due to lack of time, loving a lie-in the morning, or some may think that actually it helps them lose weight. In reality, missing breakfast can cause poor concentration in school, and evidence shows that those who eat breakfast are actually more likely to be a healthy weight. So breakfast is really important. It's about breaking the fast and providing not just the body, but also the brain with fuel. So eating a breakfast can help boost energy levels, and a balanced breakfast provides nutrients like the fiber, vitamins and minerals such as our iron and our calcium. Do need to be careful with the sugary cereals, so avoiding those on a regular basis. And in terms of thinking about healthier options, well, healthier breakfast options would include things like wholemeal toast with something like a low-fat spread, a small glass of orange juice and a low-fat yogurt, or a bowl of cereal, preferably low in fat, sugar and salt, with low-fat milk and including a piece of fruit like an apple or a banana. Porridge with chopped banana or some dried fruit is another very good option, or something like boiled egg and toast and a small glass of smoothie. So a key message is to encourage your teenagers to have breakfast on a regular basis. So we know between school, homework, sports, maybe an after-school job and hanging out with friends, it may feel that there is actually no time for healthy eating for your teenager, and it's probably very tempting to go for the quick and easy route by grabbing something that may not necessarily be healthy. Teenagers may feel hungry a lot. This is common as the body needs more nutrients to grow as it should. Snacks can be a useful way to satisfy that hunger and help provide more of the vitamins and minerals that the teen body actually needs. and to keep energy levels going and to avoid weight gain. It is important to avoid those foods that we've previously mentioned that contain a lot of added sugars. So trying to avoid a lot of the chocolate, the confectionery and the fizzy drinks, and actually look for foods that contain more fiber. So for example, the fiber grain or the whole grain bread or cereals, fruit and veg, and combine these with something like a protein rich snack. So for example, peanut butter or low-fat yogurt or cheese or milk. Too much sugar, as you're probably well aware, is not good in terms of health. That can lead to harmful fat building up inside, can cause serious health problems, and include painful tooth decay. So whilst those foods that are high in fat and sugar, they do provide energy, but really they provide very few nutrients. So in terms of thinking about healthier snack alternatives, so they could include, for example, breadsticks with soft cheese, toast with peanut butter or beans on toast, bread, cheese sticks, maybe a glass of milk, cereal with milk, or something like homemade popcorn. Staying hydrated is very important for health. We know that dehydration can cause headaches and tiredness and poor concentration. So encouraging your teenager to include 6 to 8 glasses of fluid a day. And really our best options are things like water and low-fat milk. If your teenager doesn't like water, then try to encourage them to add something like sugar-free or a no added sugar dilutable squash, just to make that easier to drink. In terms of sugary drinks, we want to try and avoid too many sugary drinks, especially between meals, because they can cause harm to the teeth. So trying to encourage your teenagers to have the sugary drinks less often and have them in smaller amounts. If unsweetened fruit juice has been drank, then really it needs to be limited to no more than 150 mils glassed once a max over the day. We know, for example, that the consumption of energy drinks by young people is on the rise. They promise improved concentration, to reduce tiredness through providing energy, caffeine, and other nutrients. But really, most contain a lot of sugar and caffeine. And both sugar and caffeine can have a negative effect on a teenager's health. And too much sugar is not good for the teeth and can lead to weight gain. Too much caffeine can cause jitteriness and nervousness, can cause headaches, trouble concentrating, trouble sleeping. And in some people, we know that large amounts of caffeine can have more serious side effects, so including fast or irregular heartbeat, high blood pressure, hallucinations, and seizures. It's important to highlight that many of these drinks also have other ingredients, and really their safety and effectiveness have not been tested in children and in teenagers. So there's a growing amount of evidence that shows that the consumption of energy drinks is detrimental to not just the physical, but also the mental health of young people. In terms of sports drinks, so for most people, plain water is all that is needed. For those teenagers who are doing vigorous physical activity lasting longer than an hour, so for example, maybe playing soccer or Gaelic basketball or hockey, if sports drinks are used appropriately, they can be helpful. These drinks contain carbohydrates, which can provide an immediate source of energy, really at a time when the body's energy stores are been started to be used up. It's very important that if your teenager is using sports drinks, that they avoid sipping them throughout the day. In terms of alcohol, we know that alcohol can have a detrimental effect on developing brains and bodies during the important time of brain development for teenagers, and can also leave teenagers feeling being vulnerable to unsafe situations. So the best way is to talk to your teenager about alcohol, to sit them down and to have an open, honest conversation. For more information on alcohol, we would encourage you to look at the DrinkAware website. So that's www.drinkaware.co.uk. In terms of physical activity, well, we know that as younger children enter their teenage years, they might lose interest in physical activity, and this is particularly common in teenage girls. Between school and homework and friends, part-time jobs, they are juggling a lot of interest and responsibilities. But regular physical activity can help your teen feel more energetic, improve their focus and attention, indeed improve their sleep, and promote a better outlook in life. Regular physical activity can also help your teenager maintain a healthy weight and prevent chronic diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, developing later on in life. So our guidelines really for children and young people aged 5 to 18 years. So our teens should aim for an average of at least 60 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity a day across the week. They should also take part in a variety of types and intensities of physical activity across the week, really to develop movement skills and for muscle and for bone strength. Physical activity then aiming to spread the activity throughout the day, and all activities should make the person breathe faster and feel warmer. So examples of moderate intensity activity would include, for example, walking the dog, skateboarding, cycling. Examples of muscle strengthening exercise or activity for young people would include football, basketball, dance, running, netball, hockey, or martial arts. All teens should be encouraged to limit the time spent in sedentary activities. That includes limiting the amount of time watching TV, playing video games, using their smartphone, computers, or tablets. If your teenager is not doing much physical activity at the moment, encourage them to start small and gradually increase. So start with a short 10-minute walk and gradually build in that. So our key message for teenagers in terms of physical activity is to get strong, move more, and to sit less. In terms of weight and body image, we know that the teenage years are a time that when many may become more aware of their own body and feel a pressure from friends and family and indeed the media to look a certain way. So for example, social pressure to be thin or to be muscular. Being a healthy weight is important, and with the media promoting the thin body ideal, it can be very difficult for teenagers to know what a healthy weight is and how this can be achieved. And by eating a varied, healthy, balanced diet and taking part in regular physical activity, this can help to maintain a healthy weight. If teenagers eat more than they need, then they can become overweight or obese. And being overweight or obese can affect a teenager's self-esteem and then also increase the risk of a number of health conditions. So for example, type 2 diabetes and heart disease. If your teenager is overweight, then eating a healthy, balanced, varied diet and maintaining a healthy lifestyle can help in terms of making it easier to lose weight. Whilst growing taller, younger teenagers may need help maintaining their existing weight in the short term, which will improve their body mass index over time. So this is often described as growing into their weight. Older adolescents that are overweight or obese and are no longer getting taller will need to lose weight to improve their body mass index. And in the short term, it can be helpful to prevent further weight gain in these adolescents, really, as they start to try to make healthier lifestyle changes that will improve their weight in the long term. We know that cases of eating disorders have been shown to peak between the ages of 15 to 19 years in teenage girls, and eating disorders also affect teenage boys. Genetics, body image issues, and pressure from the media and peers can lead to some teens excessively exercising, maybe skipping meals, and following unnecessary weight loss or fad diets. And in extreme cases, they can lead to disordered eating. A restricted diet, especially one that excludes whole food groups, so maybe cutting out our dairy or red meat or carbohydrate foods, and that can lead to nutritional deficiencies and problems in later life. So restricted diets can impair not only their physical health, but also their mental health. And an important positive message for your teenager really is about encouraging your teenager to take care of their body by eating well, by sleeping for at least 8 hours each night, and by keeping physically active. Trying to maintain a good meal pattern at this time can also help to ensure that those important nutritional requirements are being met and encourages good eating habits for later life. So we know that our teenagers are heavily influenced, not just by their peers, but also by social media. Social media potentiated peer pressure can lead teens to believe that their looks are inadequate, and that can damage their self-esteem and their body image. We know that filtering and editing tools are often used to slim body parts, so for example, to lengthen legs. These can be really difficult to detect and can be very misleading. Pressure to keep up with peers and to fit in, social media can heighten this. And we often see the promotion of detox solutions and diets. So that might include, for example, a range of potions, pills, lotions. All of these are common. And these products are usually endorsed by influencers or celebrities, and they can be very dangerous. Unfortunately, many of the claims made by detox diet promoters are exaggerated. They are not based on sound scientific evidence, and any benefit then is short-lived. If you are concerned about your teenager's body image or self-esteem, then seek help from a doctor or a health professional. So in terms of thinking about, well, what can you do as a parent or a caregiver? So trying to make healthy changes as a family. So this might be, for example, reducing the number of takeaways that you have, having healthier snacks already prepared, reducing the number of confectionery or crisps that you put in your shopping trolley. Encourage your teenager to be involved in meal preparation. So get them involved in the meal planning and the cooking. Encourage a healthy relationship with food, and really be mindful of the messages that you are giving your teenager through your own behavior and how you actually talk about food and your body. So it's important that your young person or your teenager sees you having regular balanced meals and sees you enjoying your food. So a positive message is to encourage you, your teenager, and your family to think about health and not just think about restriction. As already mentioned, so think about our vitamins and minerals in particular are all important, our iron, our calcium, our vitamin D, and our B vitamins. Encouraging and motivating your teenager to be active. So, maybe as a family, grabbing your teenagers and going out for a family walk, a cycle. It's always much easier to be active if you have somebody else with you. Talk to your teenager, be open and honest about issues such as social media, weight, alcohol, and really try and make time to have these important conversations. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Simple swaps can add up and help instill healthier habits for your teenager and for your family as a whole. So we often say that small changes can result really in big benefits. Finally, in terms of providing you with some credible nutrition information sources that you can trust, because we know that the internet and Google is full a lot of information on healthy nutrition, and much of it is inaccurate and can be very misleading. So if you are looking for further information, the British Dietetic Association, the BDA, which is the Association of UK Dietitians, is an excellent resource. The NHS website is very useful. So is Safe Food, and also their Safe Food Start campaign. Better Health, Healthier Families is a very useful resource. So that replaces the Change for Life. Public Health Agency has some very useful information, and also the British Heart Foundation. If you are looking for to access our other nutrition webinars and things like our practical recipe videos, then these are now all available on our new Public Health Dietitians YouTube channel. It might be worthwhile after this webinar checking out some of our other webinars. So for example, our Healthier Diet, Healthier You webinar provides further information on the Eat Well Guide. And the other one that may be useful is top tips for a healthier weight. So we would encourage you to view the Public Health Dietitians YouTube channel. Thank you for joining our webinar. I hope you find it of benefit.